Hello and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be making a matrix diorama. Now, you may be thinking there's already a matrix diorama. Well, this one sucks. I made this a couple years ago to go with these custom figures that I made. You know, it was a placeholder on the shelf at the time, and for the last year or so, it's just been sitting on the bottom shelf of one of my detals. I'm really proud of this Neo. And Trinity needs a little work, and I'll do that as part of this process. But I wanted these to have more of a pride of place on my shelf because this is one of my favorite movies, and I actually really love Reloaded as well. You know, I wanted to represent that more in my collection because my collection is really coming together with different sort of display units on each shelf. I want the Matrix to have its rightful place among them. So this one is not made from the typical pink insulation foam that I'd use. You know, this stuff is thicker, it's pretty dense, you can carve into it and whatnot. This is just made out of black poster board. You know, it was kind of an easier way to approach it, especially for something that, this was really just something that I made so that the figures weren't standing on an empty shelf. I wanted them to be in an environment. And so, you know, I just put this together pretty quick and dirty, and it shows. I mean, it's not very well put together. It has served its purpose for a while, but it's time to step it up. This is meant to be like you're looking down toward the elevator shaft. And I tried a little bit of forced perspective here by making these lines on the floor kind of taper in a little bit, but it's not really that successful. I am really happy with the look of the marble on the floor, so that's something I'm going to try to replicate for the better dial that we're going to make. Another thing I'm going to, you know, this is like, I literally just have action figure packaging on here, like the plastic from it, to make it look like a reflective kind of shiny surface of a floor. So again, just a lot of shortcuts on this. And then, you know, I initially had two more of these pillars here, but I was like, you know what, these look cooler from, you know, these are some of the extra McFarlane ones I had. What we're going to do differently this time is actually turn it. So we're going to be looking at the wall, essentially, like what, you know, the wall that Neo flipped in front of and the one that Trinity flipped off of, etc. Another thing I'd like to do is incorporate a lot of rubble and explosions. I've been saving all of this stuff. This is just extras from the pink insulation foam when I'm, you know, destroying parts of it and whatnot. So this can be the rubble that litters the ground or whatnot. I'm going to try some explosion effects, and I have an idea in mind for how I might approximate a bullet time effect. So I'm really looking forward to trying that as well. This will be a tiered diorama because I also have a custom Morpheus figure that I made. And so what we're going to do is the lobby scene from about here down, and then the top tier is going to be the highway chase scene from the Matrix Reloaded, where Morpheus is standing in front of the silver Cadillac that's riddled with bullet holes, and the ghost twins are coming at him in the Cadillac Escalade, and he slices through with the samurai sword. So I'm going to try an actual forced perspective thing on that. I think I've sourced a Cadillac to use that is 1/24th scale. So it is 50% of the size of a vehicle that would go with these figures. And what that means is I'm going to have to essentially taper in panels of the diorama like this and set the Cadillac back here so that it looks like it's actually receding into the distance, and that will help kind of trick the eye. And I think it'll be a cool effect. I've not tried that beyond just, you know, kind of the shoddy job I did on this one. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun. I think these will be two separate videos. I think the lobby scene will be one, and then the highway scene on the top will be a second video. So I'm really looking forward to doing this, and I'm excited to have something that will give these figures a better spot on my shelf in my display. And I invite you all to come along with me as I figure this out. So next we're going to talk about supplies, and then we'll get to the build. Okay, for supplies, we're going to be using this pink insulation foam. You get this at Home Depot. It's an inch thick, and typically you get it in panels of 24 inches by 24 inches. And you just cut it with like a carpet or box cutter or any kind of sharp knife. There are also foam cutters you can get, which I will be using a little bit on this project. We're also going to be using some of this regular foam core poster board. This is great for, you know, you have to paint this stuff black to kind of prime it and seal it, and then usually you add colors on top of it, and the black helps give it depth. The nice thing about this stuff is it's already black. It's just not as thick, and it's harder to mount magnets to, so that's why we'll be using this for the bulk of it. But for the roadway piece on the highway overpass section on top, we'll be using this, and then painting a concrete look over it. We've also got this stone texture paint.
This is going to be really useful for the pillars in the lobby scene because they had this texture to them. Also for the highway, like for the asphalt, we're going to be using this as well. This Krylon crystal clear coat with a gloss is going to be for the marble on the floors and for the pillars in the lobby. Basically, the entirety of the lobby area is going to be covered in this to give it that kind of sheen that polished marble has. And then lastly, I picked up some cotton batting. This is what you put in like pillows and stuffed animals. I'm going to be using this to make explosion effects. So those are the supplies. We're also going to be using some of this Deco Art acrylic paint. This is just stuff you get from the craft store. It's like less than $2 a bottle. Nothing special about it. It's just good paint and it holds up pretty well. Now, you do want to be careful when you clear coat this kind of foam. You want to make sure you have a nice, strong coat or two of acrylic on it. You want to do that because the solvents in this paint will eat through this foam. All right, so I'm going to get this foam cut and then we're going to build the basic structure and then I'll check in.
Okay, a little update here. So I've got all the foam cut and this is the orientation it's going to be. This top piece is slightly sloped down. It goes up like, I think it's like a 1/2 inch grade. And then I've cut these like highway barrier things so that they taper as they go back. And then the vehicle is going to be right here and that's going to give the illusion that it's further off in the distance. I've started doing this. I'm drilling into these dowels and then gluing smaller pieces in for supports and then sticking them into the top of these, gluing them in place. So that's going to give that more realistic highway barrier look. And then for the ones in the back, I'm going to be using a smaller dowel so that it recedes as it goes, just again to help create the illusion. There is a backstop thing that's going to be here. In the movie, when they pull off, this is essentially an unfinished off-ramp. You know, they pull off and then there's like a barrier there with arrows that point that way. So that's going to be another thing that goes up here. I did manage to secure the vehicle that I need for this on eBay. And it's actually really hard to find. So it's like the only one I found and I got it for a good price. I made them an offer and they accepted, thankfully. So I'm pretty excited to get that in the mail and detail that up. It's a Cadillac and it's like one of those Jada Toys dub editions. So it's got the giant wheels on it. So I am going to need to find a way to make more screen accurate wheels a thing. So that'll be a bridge I cross when I come to it. But for now, this is the direction this is going. Once I finish these, painting everything black, going to texture these and the pillars here, then we'll get to all the paint. Now these, I glued 2 pieces together overnight with clamps, and then I used my foam cutter. You can see this kind of banding that it gets. I used the foam cutter. It's a hot wire and you just push it through. So that made it more uniform. And these are going to be spaced about like that so that both Trinity and Neo can fit in here. This is going to be displayed at eye level pretty much. So it's on the top shelf of a 4-shelf setup that I have. So you're going to be looking straight at it, which is really going to help the perspective. I mean, the camera angle right now is above it a little bit. Let's take a look at a more truer representation of what it'll look like. All right, so here's a little bit better vantage point of what it's going to look like on the shelf. The perspective gets a little warped by the camera lens, so it's not exactly how it's going to look when you're in the room with it, but it's a decent enough approximation. The figure up top is a custom Ninjak I started working on a long time ago and never finished. We'll get to it one of these days. And he's a little bit tall. That Gambit body is just a little bit taller, but that'll give you an idea. Also, that Batmobile sits a bit squat compared to the vehicle that I'm going to be using. So those proportions are a little bit off. It doesn't sell the illusion quite as well as the actual vehicle that I'll be using will. But it'll give you an idea of what it's going to look like. So, okay, working on the pillars here for the lobby scene. And here's one that is done so far. And I just kind of wanted to go over the technique and how I'm doing this, because one thing I see with a lot of dioramas is that it looks a little too man-made, right? And what you really want is more of a randomness to everything. And I've really tried to do that here, where you can see it's riddled with bullets and it's taken out chunks of it. And I may end up doing even more on this, like more damage. But particularly with cracks, people tend to do cracks where they're just like, they look very like, here's a crack. and they have a little crater or something in the middle, you know, and it's just like, it doesn't look like it's a thing that happened with any kind of randomness. So just wanted to go over the technique of how I do something like this. So first of all, I'm starting with bullet holes, right? So I'm taking this pencil and I'm literally just, you kind of hold it loosely and just kind of like, you know, you don't want to deliberately go poke. You want it to just kind of be wherever, like, because bullets spray, you know? And then on the inside of the pillar, I'm going to do a couple directional ones so you can see the bullets came from, you know, you get this kind of like divot in there. Now for the tearing apart of the pillars, I'm taking this sculpting tool that I have, this double-ended sculpting tool, and I'm just kind of digging this in and popping the pieces out. Because if I were to take my X-Acto knife and carve damage into this, you see how it's too clean looking? I mean, it looks like a blade did that, right? You get these kind of like knife cut marks. So take something like this and just tear into it. That gives you what I like to call the kind of randomizing factor that you don't get from doing it in a very controlled manner. So that kind of randomizing agent just really helps to make it look a lot more haphazard and like this is a thing that happened to this pillar, not a person happening to it. And for some of the bullet holes, I've been kind of doing that to them as well. And I'm saving all these pieces because the plan is to use these as rubble on the ground and like even kind of flying out of this thing. And I'm also trying to keep in mind what this is theoretically made out of, right? These are like stone slabs on top of concrete. So, you know, you got to think about like, how does the stone break? So for cracks on this, I'm taking this sharp end, and it's pretty dull. I mean, it's pokey, but it's not that bad. And I'm just kind of like very loosely holding this and dragging it along and just kind of jerking my hand around. Like that's going to give you a lot more of, again, like kind of a random look to the damage. You also want to think about like how these things spider out, right? Like there might be a bullet hole there, and then that starts a system of cracks that kind of webs out all over the place, right? And meets with some other damage. And, you know, in some cases these slabs would kind of fall off. That'd be hard to approximate with this material, but you know, that's the kind of stuff you want to think about, right? Anyway, that's just my 2 cents. There's no right way to do this. This is just kind of the way I do it, you know, based on my experiences with this stuff and just as a visual artist in general, like the things I like to pay attention to and try to emulate. Okay, starting in on the marble floor here, I laid down black first and then I did a base coat of this green color. Trying to mix a green for this was really difficult. Like I kept adding colors and remixing and stuff. So this is what I have for the base. And then essentially to paint the marble, I'm going to be adding different textures by like blotting paint on with, you know, a towel and different brushes and whatnot. So the next step is going to be this kind of a green that has more yellow in it. And that's going to do some of the marbling and whatnot. The other thing I have done is that I painted the pillars and the back wall with this stone texture paint. And this stuff is great. I've never really used it before. You know, I've always seen it around, but I've never tried it on a project. And I wish they had it in a green color because then these would be done. Like this is exactly what these things look like in the movie. I think I'm going to try maybe like a green wash on this because I want to keep these little white flecks if I can, because that's what they look like again on screen. And I think that will just really help sell the believability of this. So I'm going to try it. I'll do it on the back, see how it works out, and then take it from there. I'm excited to finally be getting into some of the details here, and we'll probably do a little time lapse of the marble flooring just so you can kind of see the process there.
Okay, so the floor is done here. All that's left to do is hit it with a gloss clear coat. So I'm really happy with how this looks. I ended up taking a silver Sharpie and dividing the tiles up. The line of the Sharpie is a little thicker than I wanted. It is a pretty fine tip on the Sharpie, so I thought it would be a lot slimmer than this, but you know, it is what it is. I think once it has the clear gloss coat over it, it's really gonna read more like a floor. But you know, you see this kind of, I don't know what you call this. It's not grout, but it's like metal trim in between tile panels. I don't know that the movie set actually had this. I couldn't really see it in the pictures, but I thought it would really make it pop and just kind of lend more realism to it. So I decided to do it. The other thing I did was I tried to paint the white veining in the marble in a way that it would look like different panels were just kind of put down. So they kind of go in different directions because, you know, typically that's how a floor is assembled. It's just like whatever tiles kind of go together. So I tried to make the veining be the defining factor in each tile so that it looked like they were just kind of haphazardly put down instead of being one solid thing. So next up, I'm doing the wall and the pillars. Again, here's what the pillar looked like, and I hit it with a green wash, and this is perfect. I might go a little bit lighter with the color, but I mean, like, this is doing exactly what I wanted it to, because I was really worried that I would lose this kind of white sand texture. So yeah, a light green wash is going to do it, and then I get to do the fun explosion stuff. So here you can see I've mixed some gray paint and I'm adding it into the recesses of the damaged areas on the pillar. The stone texture made for a really nice texture on top of which I could just kind of dry brush onto. Dry brushing is when you sort of lightly dust paint onto the surface without a bunch of the wet medium on the brush, and it allows for a softer look overall. And this just really helped capture the look of like the torn up concrete on the inside. Okay, getting to the point here where I'm trying to figure out how to do the explosions. And I got the cotton batting, and I'm going to glue some of these little pieces of rubble that I just painted into it. And the idea is that these will fit into some of these damaged bits here and be like, you know, like the dust cloud from the blast of stuff coming out. I'd have to glue it in place, obviously, to get it to hold its position, but I'm trying to figure out if it scales the way I want it to. I think it looks good. I am going to try grabbing a cotton ball, which is like a finer little fibers in the way that they all fit together, and see how that looks. But so far I think this is pretty cool. I think if I had a bunch of these going off, it would look pretty sweet. Okay, so I ended up going with kind of a mix of the two. I tried the cotton ball. It's really dense and it's got these little like pilly bits in it, so it doesn't work for the overall explosion effect, but for like a smaller bullet hole or for the beginnings of the explosion, it works pretty well. So this one is a mix of the two, and then I just glued these little rubble bits in there, and it's all pretty sturdy. And then for the bullet time effect, I was really excited to try this, and I think it's working. I wish, you know, I could do like a clear version, but I went with this jeweler's wire and I just coiled it up around a paintbrush and then pulled the brush out, and we have a bullet time effect. And because it's jeweler's wire, it can just stick right into the foam, and it ends up looking pretty cool. So I'm gonna have several of those, you know, coming out of different bullet holes in the diorama. I'm also going to be doing some rebar coming out of this one. So for that, I'm gonna use a paper clip, and I'm just gonna like wedge it in between these two pieces and then have like a piece of foam rubble coming off of it. This is the fun stuff I was really looking forward to doing, like the real detail work.
All right, and here's the finished lobby scene part of the diorama. It may not be showing up super well on camera, but there is a bit of a gloss to everything because I used several coats of a clear gloss coat spray paint on it. And I think the bullet effects are pretty cool. Let's give it a little spin so you can see. I feel like this stuff works better when it's in 3D and when it's kind of like you can move around it, because it does look like this little frozen moment in time. I'm excited about that because what I fell in love with about those McFarlane Matrix figures was the frozen moment in time aspect of them. I don't think I still have it, but I tried to sculpt a little Neo taking flight back when I was in high school when those movies were coming out. And, you know, this is something that I've loved for half of my life at this point. So it's cool to apply my skill set as an adult to it and still find new things about it to love and to enjoy. So I'm really happy with this whole process. I was a little worried that maybe like all of the effects were a little too much, like it was a little too busy. And I don't know, maybe that is the case, because when I looked at this thing before I put any of the effects on and it was just like the bullet hole riddled lobby, like it looked really cool. And part of me feels like maybe I shouldn't covered up a bunch of it with, you know, this other stuff. But I think it just makes for a really dynamic, unique look to the diorama, because you can always have characters standing around in a lobby, right? But it needs that damage. And I think the cool thing about the Matrix is that they do move so fast, and when everything else is happening around them. And so to had to look like you know, this frozen moment in time with these bullets shooting past them, I think is pretty cool. So now that we've done that, let's take a look at the diorama with the figures inside of it. All right, and here they are. And yeah, these look pretty cool. I've got Neo in a little bit of a pose like he's sidestepping a bullet. It's hard to see from this angle, but there is like a bullet time effect over here, so it is kind of like he's moving out of the way of it. This Neo is a custom that I made. So what we have is the McFarlane Toys Neo, you know, in the real world head sculpt. And I resculpted the hair to match the look of when he's in the Matrix, and then I made the little glasses out of some action figure packaging and this same kind of wire that the bullet time effects are made out of. The body is a Mezco Netflix Punisher, and I painted the little steel toe on the boots. I made the harnesses out of a bunch of different stuff, mostly NECA Terminator Genesis police officer belts, and then these are all the guns from the original McFarlane figure. And then the coat is from GPS Slot, which is something I refer to a lot on this channel. It's a fantastic eBay seller that does 112 soft goods. Yeah, and again, I think that just looks so cool when you're moving around it, because that's the thing. This is going to be in a shelf in my display case where you do move around it. So it stays still, but as you move, you know, you're going to see like the way that these things are three-dimensional. So what I'm going to do now is take the camera off of the holder, and we're going to do a little bit of a handheld gorilla style thing so you can get a better look inside the diorama. Okay, so from above here, let's take a look as we move around it. Yeah, I'm pretty stoked about that. I think the bullet time stuff looks cool. I wish I could have done some kind of clear resin or something, but that would have been a whole research and development process, and sometimes you got to do the things that you know will allow you to finish a project. And then I've got the rubble pieces kind of strewn about here, and I think it looks so cool when you have the rubble, like, you know, I just glued these pieces onto the batting so you can really just see them like kind of suspended in this moment in the air. And there's the bullet that Neo is sidestepping. I just want to give you a better look at the floor here. You can see that the texture of the foam is coming through a bit, that sort of banding, which is not ideal, but you know, it's the material we have to work with. So, but yeah, I'm really proud of this floor. I really feel like I was able to hit a marble look to it. But I want to do a quick preview of what this thing is going to look like with the top half, which will be part 2 of this build. And there we go. So you can get an idea here of what the forced perspective does for this thing. I'm really excited to do this top half as well. I've got the, I think this is a great compromise for the amount of space that I have. I'm really loving using these kind of tiered displays as a solution. If you've not seen it yet, I did a video on my Dark Knight trilogy custom diorama display. And with that, I have 3 tiers where I've, got the Dark Knight Batcave on the bottom, and then just kind of a street sidewalk, and then a rooftop. So yeah, I'm always, as I curate my collection and my displays, I'm always looking for different ways to accommodate all of the figures that I have, the ones that I want still, etc. So we'll be finishing this one up in part 2. So that will conclude part 1 of this Matrix diorama build. Thank you all so much for watching. Please give this video a like if you enjoyed watching it, and also if you enjoyed this kind of content, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and come along with me as we build more dioramas, more custom action figures, and more custom vehicles. If you have any questions about anything, feel free to ask them in the comments below. I love chatting with you all about these builds. At the beginning of this video, you'll have seen a trailer for my graphic novel Count. It's my sci-fi reimagining of the Count of Monte Cristo. It's a story about revenge, redemption, and retribution, and it's got great swashbuckling action, cool robots, vehicle chases. It's a lot of fun. I'm really proud of it, and I'd love for you to check it out. There's a link for it in the description below. Also linked below are various items that I used in this video if you want to purchase any of them and try them for yourself. So thank you all for watching, and until next time,
Keep your head on swivel.